Hello and welcome to the next game in the Yakuza series, Yakuza 6, The Song of Life. This game is one I took a while to get to the first time around, with this being my second time playing it with the PC version. And with its previous titles right behind it, I did worry that 6 may not impress me as much or not be as up to par with the previous titles. Ryuga Gotoku Roku Inochi no Uta, or Like a Dragon 6, The Poetry of Life, showed up after the massive success of Yakuza 0 and shortly after Kiwami 1. But since 6 was to be the wrap-up to Kiryu's overall story, I waited a good while with playing the spin-off Judgment to pass the time till Kiwami 2 came out and was going to proceed with the series' story up to 6. That was until one day Yakuza 7 was announced, with me seeing it on an April Fool's Day of all days, and would release when I wasn't looking. Daunted with the potential length of 4 and 5, and with really wanting to play 7 sooner than later, I wouldn't play 6 until almost 2 years after it had initially released back in 2018 worldwide. When I eventually did get to 6, I was already familiar with the Dragon Engine and some of the mechanics that 6 had due to playing through Kiwami 2 and a bit of Judgment, since they used similar assets as 6 did when Ryuga Gotoku Studios was developing it. So let's get into the first RGG game to use the Dragon Engine, continue where Yakuza 5 left off ambiguously. By the way, remember when I said that 5 didn't really connect to any of the games?
That's right, Major, you did!
I lied.
And see how 6 is after Yakuza 0 and Kiwami's successes. Did Ryuga Gotoku Studios make a competent game? Does its core story wrap up Kiryu's journey in a satisfying way? Is this just Yakuza 3 but done better? And is the premiere of the Dragon Engine good here, or did it only get better in later titles? Join me in trying to answer the question, just how good is Yakuza 6? By this point, I've already seen what the Dragon Engine can offer based on just the visuals within Kamurocho and the combat mechanics not being as much of a blindside when I compare to when I first played Kiwami 2. So I had a better idea of what to expect, and from what I can tell, Ryuga Gotoku Studios continue to innovate not only the gameplay mechanics but the story pacing being even better now compared to 5. I'd argue that 6 has a better story to it than 0, at least, since I was especially more invested in the series at this point. This is a much more personal story compared to previous games, with the focus with only Kiryu playable and his closest friends, as most of the main cast, with some notable new ones, with the Hirose family in the brand new area of Onomichi in Hiroshima. Onomichi is a relatively smaller area than usual in the series, but it's got so much stuff to do packed into it, making the argument that less is more with the game world a compelling argument. And whenever I went exploring, which 6 gives plenty of opportunities to do, I would be so giddy to look around for whatever the two cities had to offer and just be in awe of how good this game was compared to its later games in the series. For the first game to use the Dragon Engine, I can't help but be impressed with how everything looks, and Onomichi has a gorgeous style to it despite the smaller area it is. Then there's the gameplay that 6 has to offer, which was at this point the biggest change for the series as a whole. So let's get into it. Since Yakuza 6 would be the template for the later remake of Kiwami 2, the mechanics for combat remain relatively the same, with Kiryu being able to do combos with his usual dragon style, grappling enemies to throw them around like ragdolls into others or kick objects into them, as well as doing charge attacks and combos. The leveling system is also pretty much the same, and the extreme heat mode making its debut, enabling Kiryu to do more damage, more actions, and use heavier objects as weapons as before in Kiwami 2. And we have the heat actions returning and just being a joy to watch. Some of them bringing the nobody died to Kiryu question again, though they are a bit more jank with some select ones to pull off compared to Kiwami 2 in previous games, and there is no dedicated weapon system like previous games, though it's not that important to the overall combat. Also, when the game was ported to PC, the physics got tweaked a bit, making for some really strange to happen to enemies and Kiryu. The combat also goes in hand with most of the criticism that SITS has. Most criticisms I could find would say that it's too clunky and not as good as the iterations that 5 and 0 introduced, along with the lack of style system that 0 and Kiwami 1 implemented. Which I also have said that when I first played Kiwami 2 was something I had an issue with for a good while until I got used to it. But ever since I started this particular series of videos, I've played the various gameplay styles the series has had to offer, and though I'd be quick to say 5 to Kiwami 1 arguably have the best combat, SITS and Kiwami 2 are not only great to play, more importantly, they're fun to play, and just experiment around with and are worthy substitutes to that system. From what I could tell, the titular feel the heat moments in most of the boss battles are absent this time around, and instead are usually these quick time events in boss fights that, admittedly cool, just indicate that the fight is entering a phase 2 with them. Not bad, but a little disappointing. There weren't many notable boss fights that stuck out in particular, but almost every fight I would say, wow, that was a great and fun fight. At least when I was writing notes, which is a good thing and a bad thing, since no particular one stuck out from the rest. At least not as much as when I compared to the lead-ups to the boss fights. Particular ones that stuck out are when Kiryu and the new Hirosa family raid a Yakuza-controlled hotel to save someone, with some funny moments happening in the showers. Crotch shot when Kiryu goes through the dilapidated Shangri-La fighting the most terrifying gimp I've encountered, acting like a Mr. X. Not really a boss, but that really stuck out because of just how out of pocket it was. The dogfight leading up to Jungi Han is good as well. Using explosive barrels to take down enemies is fairly cathartic. And finally is the final rush up the Millennium Tower in the game, dealing with waves of enemies, dodging a heelless minigun, and even using rocket launchers for once. The lead-ups to the boss fights during these times are some of the best that the series has had to offer, and were pretty enjoyable to go through. Plus, a good portion of these boss fights, Kiryu exposes his glorious back tattoo, and it's still some great fan service to behold. Returning are also mini-games, although there's not as much compared to previous games. What is available is still fairly interesting. We have some returning ones, such as batting cages, mahjong, darts, some pretty fun karaoke songs returning as well. And various games in Club Sega, along with new ones to go with these older ones, like the Rise Up Gym, letting Kiryu get some gains outside of combat, along with selling the best healing items in the game. Spearfishing and Onomichi functioning a lot like an on-rail shooter game, a full-on baseball game in Onomichi, the app called Troubler that gives missions for people in help, and Yakuza introducing a minigame that is just out of nowhere with the chat room game, which is just button prompts that has streamers do things on screen, kinda like Twitch. It's not the weirdest that the series has done so far. Kiwami 2 had the toilets, which were just a pissing contest for a reminder. The amount here I stated may be a smaller pool of minigames for a Yakuza title, but they're all fairly good ones. Yakuza 6 also has the clan creator battles that Kiwami 2 had, with the Kiryu clan taking on a group called Justice, with less tower defense and more storming the castle gameplay. While doing many of these, Kiryu will get points in his EXP pool for 5 areas to upgrade his stats, increase heat actions, abilities, unlock more combat moves, and life skills like in Kiwami 2. Most of these are roughly the same as Kiwami 2, so if you come into sits after Kiwami 2, you'll have a general idea of how it works. There are also returning keys and lockers in Kamurocho and Onomichi, but instead of coin lockers to unlock, there's these safes that are strewn around the game world to find and unlock with respective keys that give Kiryu items. And if you're wondering why compared to previous titles, Yakuza 6 comes off as a bit bare, from what I could find, Ryuga Totoku Studios was worried about making sure the Dragon Engine and the game they were developing would work properly and run well. Take that with a grain of salt because I couldn't find official statements, so when playing SIDS, there are some areas in Kamurocho that are cut off in-game. While it is disappointing that the content isn't as expansive as, say, Yakuza 5, SIDS having what it has and actually functioning really well is something I can appreciate more than having a game patched too much and not running well at all due to that. Since that's a majority of the gameplay taken care of, especially since I'd be reiterating Kiwami 2's gameplay mostly, let's get into some of the story content and immersion that Yakuza 6 has to offer.
すごい本物だ初めて見たよ尾道夫くん
意外と人気あるじゃねえか仕方ね一肌脱ぐかようガキども俺こそがチャーミングな八作フェイスおしゃれな尾道ラーメン帽子キュートな魚のポシェット漁師の心意気クールな長靴生かしたナウイ尾のトレーナーそう俺こそが尾道の象徴尾の道夫だ道夫くんありゃありゃゲシパスゲシパスおりゃおりゃへへへ
Man, that stings!
Substories are back in Yakuza 6 and have become much more organic and natural to find them this time around, split between the two cities of Onomichi and Kamurocho. No joke, I was just walking around Kamurocho and had 3 substories pop up in the span of a few minutes. Just walking around the two cities can have these pop up, and though it can be a bit annoying when just walking around to have them back to back, it still feels like I'm discovering them myself without much effort into getting them. There are some notable ones that stick out too. My personal favorite is when Kiryu becomes the Onomichi mascot Onomichio, or Onomichio. It's a story that has equal parts of Yakuza silliness and seriousness to it, and even when Kiryu is wearing this outfit, he's pretty intimidating. Especially when in the story some thugs make kids upset, so Kiryu beats the shit out of them while wearing the outfit, along with badass voice work.
何ですかあなたたち
うるせえんだよこんなとこでガキを集めてギャーギャーやりやがってよ
この辺は俺らの遊び場なんだよ誰の許可取ってやってんだよ
なんだよあいつら
怖いよ子供たちが怖がってるじゃないですかやめてください
クソガキどもがもっと怖くしてやろうかああ
助けて
おい
あなんだお前ダッセーキャラだな
頭にラーメンつけてんのか意味わかんねえ流行んねえよそれ
俺もそれはそう思うだがなガキ泣かせて生きがってるてめえらよりはダサかね
あなんだと
やんのかゆるキャラがよ
えよ俺はゆるキャラだがなてめえら見逃せるほどゆるかねえんだよ
面白いおいお前らこのゆるキャラぶっ殺すぞ
Know your fucking place, trash!
なんだよこのゆるキャラ
覚えてねえなら覚えとけ。俺は尾道のゆるキャラ小野道夫だ。
小野道夫？なんでこんなゆるキャラが強えんだよ。ありえねえだろ。
運が悪かったんだよ。お前らは今度ガキを泣かせるようなことをしたら命はないと思うんだな。分かったら。
Kiryu coming across Pocket Circuit Fighter from Kiwami 1 and Yakuza 0 and helping him out with being a good father. Then there's the clan creator storyline to take down Justice, or just outlandish ones such as this supposed time jumper to stop events from happening, with Kiryu having to take a leap of faith and believing her. There's a lot of sub-stories in Yakuza 6, and just finding them and doing them feels right alongside with the main storyline. The music this time around is also some good stuff, though not many stick out as much as the final track or the final boss. And Jungi Han's tracks, standing out the most, for me at least. The voice acting and presentation is also top-notch again. And as usual, in order to show it well, I'm going to delve into some spoilers for the game. So here's the timestamp if you want to skip to the story synopsis, or if you want to skip any and all spoilers, here's the timestamp for the wrap-up. Ready? Here we go. Some of the best moments in the game come from Kiryu showing some of the most emotion he's had since Kiwami 1, with some of the best coming from his interactions with the newly introduced Kurose family, most notably with Yuta, such as when Jungi Han brutally beats Yuta, making the usually stoic Kiryu actually get noticeably angry. Kiryu getting upset with Yuta being incapable of making a move to save Haruto after some revelations in the story, making Kiryu mad enough to punch him through a door just to knock sense into him. And one of the moments that really stuck out for Kiryu was before the final boss fight, with him getting beat on and just taking it without moving much at all. Kiryu on the brink of tears when he finally sees Haruka again after everything that's been happening in the game.
"お前が目覚ましたら説教してやろうと思ってた。黙って姿消したお前を俺も朝顔の子供たちも死ぬほど心配した。他にも話したいことは山ほどあったはずなんだ。なのによ、こうして生きているお前の顔を見たらもう何から話していいのか分かりゃしねえ。
おじさん、ごめんなさい。
And Daigo acknowledging Kiryu as his father, or when, at the wrap-up, when Kiryu makes a threat about what happens whenever someone messes with his family.
場合によってはお前が大事にしている人間も巻き添えになるぞ。
やってみろ。いろいろ調べたんだろう。俺を本気で怒らせたらどうなるか試してみるか。
Oh, manly fainting noises.
Yakuza 6 has some of the best stuff going for it in presentation, and its pacing is S tier, with the PC port making the already gorgeous environments even more so. Though the best part of the game is still Kiryu's bat tattoo. Right, there's a story to this. Let's get into that. Yakuza 6 starts off almost immediately after the ending of Yakuza 5 and wraps up some of the leftover plot threads with Kiryu going to prison for crimes he committed in events from Yakuza 5 for roughly 3 years. After being released and going back to morning glory, he discovers that during that time, Haruka had disappeared due to the media attention she had been getting at the time that could potentially have harmed the prospects of the other orphans. Determined to find her, Kiryu ends up finding her in Kamurocho, which is now the battlefield for the Sayo Triad and the Tojo clan, with Daigo out of the picture and in prison. With Haruka involved in a hidden run and is now comatose in the hospital, along with who she was protecting, her son, Haruto Samamura. For fear of Haruto going to the system and never being able to see Haruka again, and the war ongoing in Kamurocho, which began months prior with an attack on Little Asia letting the Sayo take it over, Kiryu takes Haruto into hiding in Onomichi, Hiroshima, to search for Haruto's father. While there, Kiryu befriends the local Hirose family in Kiyomi while searching for Haruto's father, even becoming involved in the happenings of the Yomei Alliance and Tojo clan's plans. Within a few days of his stay in Onomichi, meeting Sumeya of the Tojo trying to broker a deal with Yomei head Kurusu without Daigo being a part of it. Over time, Kiryu and the Hirose family get a clue to Haruto's father being a host named Tatsukawa in Kamurocho. With Nagumo and Yuta of the Hirose with him, Kiryu ends up butting heads with the Jinwan Mafia head Jungi Han.
Hey, Virgil! Your portal opening days are over. Give me the Amato.
If you want it, then you'll have to take it.
And finds where Tatsukawa lives, only to find his long cold corpse. With the Sayo being the prime suspects, Kiryu and co meet Sayo leader Big Lo, who talks of a secret of Onomichi while meeting Kiryu alone later to confirm that Tatsukawa wasn't Haruto's father, when shortly after showing off his glorious physique.
I'm here for Chiaotzu. We need to train.
But the doctor said if your shoulder's getting any bigger...
That's why we don't see him anymore.
Kiryu gets a call about Patriarch Hirose being hunted by the Yomei Alliance, whom are looking for Haruto. After finding Hirose, it's revealed that Haruto's father is not only important to what's going on with the Tojo and Sayo, but that Yuta is Haruto's father and the heir to the Sayo Triad. They're barely able to absorb this information when shortly after the Jinwan take Haruto to a neighboring dock where Kiryu rescues him from Jungi Han, and before Jungi Han can utter the secret of Onomichi, is shot, leading Kiryu and co to try and talk to Lo for answers and to stop the hunt for Yuta and Haruto, leading to Yuta attempting a suicide attack on Lo, with Kiryu barely able to save them from the blazing building. Lo then says that this outcome is part of Chairman Kurusu's plan to have Lo eliminated, with Hirose carrying his plan in order to protect the secret of Onomichi. Lo reveals that this secret dates back to even before World War II, with Lo bluffing he knows the secret to have Kurusu launder Heihatsu from China for a very good while, with the help of Lo's code to find the secret and information that the fire of Little Asia was instigated by Lo's other son, Jimmy, and Kurusu's son, Tsuneo Awami of Awami Shipbuilding, the legal front of the Yomei Alliance, using it as a way to remove Daigo from the Tojo and take it over with Tsuneo puppeteering from the shadows. Despite the dire circumstances, Kiryu returns to Onomichi with Lowe's code, having Yuta stay in Kamurocho to look after Haruka and Haruto with Date, and facing Yome attacks in Onomichi, is able to decipher the code that leads to blueprints leading to the secret of Onomichi. Despite the efforts of Hirose to stop them, the secret is revealed and is a battleship. But not just any battleship, the battleship Yamato.
恐怖による支配嫌いじゃないんだよね
Mark II, built in secret by the Awami Shipbuilding Company after World War II and the blackmail that Kurusu has used against a politician named Daidoji to gain all his power and influence over the years, since Daidoji's ties run deep, even coining his nickname as the Fitzer in underworld circles, despite being terminally ill, and Kurusu using Hirose to carry out his plans to hide the Mark II, even killing anyone who may know or come to know its existence, including founding members of the Yome. With the secret out in the open and Daidoji's position in jeopardy with the Mark II's existence, he cuts a deal with Kurusu's son Tsuneo to take out Kiryu before he passes, and will give Tsuneo the same treatment Kurusu received upon success. Tsuneo has the Yome and Tojo after Kiryu and the Hirose family, along with Haruka and Haruto now. After Haruka miraculously wakes up, Kiryu becomes determined to stop Tsugai, who's leading the Tojo for Tsuneo, wages an attack on the Millennium Tower with the Hirose family to stop Tsugai, only to witness Sumaya being used a plot to kill Kiryu to fail and him losing his life. With the events transpiring, Nadumo and Kiryu go to wage a two-man final attack on Tsuneo and Tsugai at Kurusu's funeral. Before they stop them, in a cowardly move, Tsuneo uses his newfound influence and its god-awful back tattoo.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
To find and kidnap Haruka and Haruto, forcing Kiryu not to defend himself until the Hirose family comes in to let Kiryu take down Tsuneo once and for all, with what appears to be the cost being Kiryu's life. Roughly 1 month later, everyone seems to be living relatively peaceful lives, with some doubt about Kiryu's death coming from Akiyama most notably. In a twist, Kiryu brokered a deal with one of Daidoji's followers to release Daido from prison to alleviate Yome Tojo tensions, and to fake his own death and go into hiding forever, all for the price of taking to his grave everything Daidoji was involved with, effectively becoming the man who erased his name. With one final shot of Haruto taking his first steps in life, Kiryu looks on one last time at the Morning Glory orphanage and walks into his new life of solitude, ending the saga of Kiryu, the Dragon of Dojima. If you skipped ahead to this point in the video, welcome. Just as Kiryu's story wrapped up, we now begin to wrap up this video. With a little over 20 hours of Yakuza 6 I played, I do have some criticisms for the game despite liking it as much as I did. First off is that compared to previous games, the cast is much smaller and feels more back to form with Kiwami 1, with it also focusing more on newer characters like Yakuza 3 had done prior. It's not a bad thing since the story is more focused on giving closure to Kiryu's overall story. Second, while the new Dragon engine makes a great first impression, it still feels experimental with later games to build and refine on what was established here. Third is that while Kiryu's story ends pretty well, it feels a tad abrupt with how it wrapped up his overall story. On the other hand, the smaller cast helps the narrative not feel bloated or convoluted compared to Yakuza 5's. Despite the Dragon engine being a little jank in places, what Ryuga Totoki Studios implemented in 6 is still fun to play and explore in. And while the story could have done a bit more with Kiryu's closest associates, Majima for example, or Saejima, how the story was told is much better pacing compared to 5's, which could grind to a halt and turn off a controller with how long the story got off. Though 6 did this sometimes as well. The degree of it was noticeably lesser and more concise. Overall, 6 is a very competent and enjoyable Yakuza game, from start to finish, that wraps up Kiryu's story and does leave room for more in this series to continue later on. This is still something I'd gladly play again and with Yakuza 6 having an extensive recap of the series up to this point, it's pretty accessible for newcomers or just to get a refresher before beginning the main game. Yakuza 6, as I said, I played on PC through Steam and is also available through GOG, PlayStation, and Xbox, while also on Game Pass if you're curious to play it for yourselves. Before we fully end this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you choose to, or even leave a comment if you like this kind of stuff. What did you like about Yakuza 6? What did you hate or just not gel with? Have you even played Yakuza 6? Or did you just skip it to get into the later titles like I did? Hopefully this answered how good Yakuza 6 is, but what does Haruka say to Haruto? And in some way, to Kiryu?
おい、中身確認しろ。
待てよ。俺にもプライバシーってもんが。てめえみてえなクズにあるわけねえだろ。やめろ。触んじゃねえ。What's in the box?
血は